Welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode, we had a hard but necessary conversation about loss and death, especially when it comes to supporting our students and their families. Please go back and check it out. And while you're there, leave us a review. We value you and these conversations. And by the way, we've been getting a lot of great reviews, so keep them coming.
Appreciate it.
Our guest today helps individuals and organizations find their greatest expression. She is a seasoned business consultant and coach. She is certified by Brené Brown and is among, I'm going to say, the elite group of globally certified Dare to Lead facilitators, offering Dare to Lead training content in the U.S. and abroad. Grab your favorite Brené Brown book, Letitia already did, and a journal. Please welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally, Ashley Gibbs Davis. Yay! Hey.
Yes, hands.
Happy to have you here.
Thank you. I have my avalanche of Brene Brown books over there.
Nice. Mine are back there on my shelf, and then I've got a few here. My journal.
Yay! From our workshop.
Yep. So we're just going to Brene Brown nerd out for a second. Before we get started, though, Letitia, you gonna honor us with our little beginning activity that we started doing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ashley, I know that you're new to the Teacher's Pep Rally. After today, you'll be part of the family. Right. We started doing something called Happy Happenings. And it's just an opportunity for us to go around and share with each other and our listeners some happy things that took place during the week. We want to just send out positive vibes and really focus on the good stuff. We know there's plenty not so good things out there. So, we'll plow through those too, but our happy happenings have been awesome. And tonight, I think I'm going to start with Pete.
All right. Nice. So it's a parent conference week at our school.
Ooh, okay.
And me being a specialist, parents don't really have much to say to me usually. We usually do extra classes with the after school program, and we keep the kids that are still at school, we keep them happy and busy and engaged. And I finished up what I needed to do today. There was a knock at the door and there was a parent, and I'm like, oh boy. And I said, okay, maybe it's a question about grades or something. Opened the door, a gentleman and his wife, and he said, Mr. Bush, you don't know me, we haven't met yet, but you've had my son for 5 years, and he doesn't stop talking about you. I've never had the opportunity to meet you, and I just wanted to let you know how much you mean to me, how much we appreciate you and what you've done for our son. It was the coolest thing ever. Just that little bit. Take it. Thank you very much. Put it in my back pocket. That will help me through another day. So that was really cool. Just those little things. Teachers kind of parent conference week, but here was something that they just came up and just said, hey, I just wanted to thank you. You're a cool guy. Thank you very much. So that was it.
Nice. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I believe Brene Brown has a story about her daughter teaching her about marbles. So somebody put a marble in your jar.
That's a marble.
Love it. Got a marble.
Yeah.
Erin, what is your happy happening for this week?
So mine is I took some time off last week. Took a little vacay and really unplugged, Letitia. Like no work. Every now and again, work would start to seep in my mind. I went, no. Like, no, I'm not. That's not where I'm at. Like, look around you. You see palm trees. This is not an office. Right. It was great. Like, I didn't know how much I needed that until actually I came back from it and could just feel. It had been 6 months probably since I've taken time off. So it just felt good. It just felt good to get away, not have responsibilities, and unplug. So that's my happy happenings.
I love it. I am so proud of you because I know that takes work and you're getting so much better at it. I'm super proud of you.
Thank you.
Well, Fred, I'm going to let you off the hook and I'm going to go next.
Oh, this is an interesting twist.
Curveball.
Stay ready, buddy. Stay ready. So my happy happenings is two things. I got invited to a birthday bash with a 1920s casino theme.
Cool.
And I got so excited. I ordered my dress, the little flapper thing. I got the gloves, the thing to hold the cigarette, even though I don't smoke. I mean, I'm just so stoked about this 1920s party. And then I did something out of my comfort zone, which is something I shared with our listeners early on this season, is I just want to go beyond the parameters, right? Just outside. I impulsively bought tickets to go see Michelle Obama at the Fox Theater in December.
Nice.
So after I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, did I just do that? But nope, living outside the box. You only live once. So Michelle, here I come.
All right.
That's cool.
Those are my happy happenings.
Maybe she'll be a guest on TPR. Do your magic.
Make it happen.
Make it happen. Yeah, I could do. Or Tyler Perry. He's moderating.
Yeah, she's got quite a lineup. That's going to be.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
So
nice.
that's my happy happening. Fred.
Well, as some might know, I know you three know. Ashley, you don't know. My oldest is getting married this weekend, so she is ready to hatch this chicken. But I am so looking forward to it. But I don't want to go into great detail about that, obviously, because I know that's still going to happen. I'd like to share that again next week. So, but more importantly, you all know that I am a gadget guy, right? So by day, I'm the teacher in the classroom at the college level, and then I'm also the guy trying to inspire young people. I think I have a problem. I think I just like toys, and so this past week I received one of the next items that I'll be reviewing, and every time I get these little packages in the mail, I just get happy. I just love getting mail. So this is the next one. It's 30 Days Lost in Space, right?
Okay.
Oh, nice.
It's a circuit board. It basically presents you with a number of problems. Every time you solve the problem with coding or electronics, it takes you to the next level. So you have to figure out that problem. So it's kind of like a what do you call it? The room,
Escape room. Yeah.
Escape room in a box, So so I'll be talking about this and sharing this, but I love getting little gadgets in the mail. It's the best.
It's like
It's the
fan
best.
mail.
It is like, well, yes.
I thought Fred was going to say, you guys aren't going to believe what I'm about to say, but I built a robot to walk my daughter down the aisle.
I am out of the boot. So I am out of the boot. Yeah! We're good. Yes. So we're walking. It's good feeling. Achilles is back in shape. So it's
Just
good.
in time.
Well, yeah.
Just in time.
I'm going to own that dance floor.
Well, we definitely saved the best for last. Ashley, share with us your happy happenings here.
Thank you. I don't know the best for last. My heart is so full from all of that. Life events. I'll share something that actually really surprised me, that I got a dog in the last few months, and this was a total radical act of love for my children. And I knew the labor of love part would fall to me. But in the course of these few months, I've had this evolution of going from seeing people with dogs as like pets. I just had like background kind of. I mean, at some point I was looking in my dog's eyes and thought, my God, I think this is a sentient being. Then,
they are.
Like, after like some more time, realizing I think this is an enlightened sentient being. Like the unconditional love and the forgiveness and the ease and patience and all of the things that I read about or I integrate in teaching and help my kids, like the dog, it was just so surprising to me because I had such a story about what a dog is or a pet and just so one-dimensional. And so I think my happy happening is this arc of this whole dimension of love and love gift exchange with dogs and with any animal really, but it's been a very beautiful, enlivening part of all of our lives. And what's really annoying is I threatened the kids that if they did not take care of the dog, we were going to find another home for the dog that would. And of course, now the dog and I are totally beholden and smitten, and that will never happen. The kids call my bluff all the time. That is my ongoing happy happening.
Excellent.
That's
is
awesome.
Amazing.
That is
Thank
awesome.
you for
And it's so
sharing
true.
that.
And it's so true what you just said too. So that's awesome.
It is. I read that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ashley.
Well, I'm just going to say, I say that with apology too, for people who I've come to know now, their relationship with their animals. I just didn't know. And so I feel really humbled by the best word I can think of, just the ignorance of that, and where I might have unintentionally or caused harm or insult just by missing something that was so important to another person. So that first part where I described that, just seeing them as pets, I say that with a lot of now humility and apology and a new understanding.
That's cool.
And that reminder all the time of there's so much more I don't know than that I do know. And So my ongoing happy happening. Letitia, what were you going to say?
Oh my gosh, don't make me cry, Ashley. We just started. But I recently read an article that said when a dog owner and their dog meet eye to eye, and there's like this staring of each other, of one another, that they are experiencing happy hormones are flowing through their bodies and they're connecting with us. So I think you're definitely onto something. Thank you so much for sharing. That is beautiful. Can you tell I'm a dog lover? Okay.
But fun fact, we had a dog on the teacher's pep rally.
Really?
And the cat.
And the cat. And the cat.
I love it. We need to have a bring your pet day.
Oh boy.
Okay, I'm sorry, Pete, because you're the one that has to edit. But anyway, thank you guys for sharing.
It's in.
We hope our listeners and those watching on YouTube kind of catch the wave and start doing happy happenings in your own lives, and hopefully spreading some more sunshine in your area of influence. Good deal. Erin, take it away.
Yeah, so I think Ashley's answer was perfect because I want to ask you how to define leadership. And your answer to what you said, for me, if I were to define a leader, I would say a leader has the ability to be open to learning new things, changing their mind, seeing things in a new perspective. So that was kind of a nice little segue, I think. But you've described or defined leadership. Do you mind telling us how you would define that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I'll take the definition from Dare to Lead from Brené Brown's research, that a leader is anyone who sees and takes responsibility for developing the potential in a person or even a process. So it could be an individual contributor. But I actually personally and professionally expand her definition. And I love Abby Wambach, who wrote Wolfpack and is a phenom.
I'm looking for my copy of that book, one of my favorite books.
Yeah, it's in my avalanche here somewhere. She talks about how leadership is also every person who allows their own voice to guide their life and the lives of those they care about. And so what that speaks to me is who they care about at home, at work, in the world. And the other part that I would add in is we have Brené's and we have Abby Wambach. And the part in there to me that is the foundational plate is how we show up to our own self, because that's the gear. And we'll probably come back to this a lot, I hope, in this conversation, that's the gear that moves all the other ones. So we can only show up fully and in our curiosity and willingness to learn and be humbled and authentic to the extent we are that way with our own self. And that's usually what gets missed as we look over there and the team here. And I see this all the time in my individual work with leaders and with teams. And so I'll add that dimension in of leading oneself, being a leader to one's own self.
And that's probably a major foundation or component of Dare to Lead. Would you agree?
Yeah, it isn't in the definition of leader, but in the heart of daring leadership, one of the three cornerstones. I'll show, I know we're on a podcast, but I'm showing an image of a stool. One of the three legs is that self-awareness and self-love matters.
I'm working on that one, which we'll probably talk about in this conversation.
So.
Yeah. So in Dare to Lead, if someone isn't familiar with the book or the program, how would you describe it so that they kind of just have an understanding as we take a little bit deeper dive in just a little bit of the elements of it?
Yeah. So there's a ton of research and a ton of resources around Dare to Lead. The other thing I do want to mention, if that isn't known to everyone listening, everything in Dare to Lead has a parallel hub called Daring Classrooms, where I would say the entire Dare to Lead community of facilitators, Brene Brown, her sisters are teachers. All of this work is also studied and researched and grounded in how this can support educators. So every time we talk about Dare to Lead, have Daring Classrooms in mind also. It's a really important bridge. So Dare to Lead comes out of her research where she's basically like, all right, leadership, I want to be a better leader. I want to be courageous. So what is courageous leadership? And she went out and asked all these companies and creatives and educators and military, and everyone was kind of like, I don't know, you have it or you don't have it. I don't know. And the research didn't bear that out. And so she's like, let's flip it. What is happening when it isn't courageous leadership. And then the number one thing that bubbled up to the top was that people aren't showing up for hard conversations. They're tapping out, they're maintaining nice cultures, or not giving or receiving feedback, or staying in that curiosity. So from there, the whole program and the book launched. It's predicated on the heart of daring leadership. And the number one premise is that you can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability. And that's the part that everyone's like, can I have everything else but that part? And vulnerability is pretty squishy. And the way we define it in this work is it's uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And we can say more about that in a little bit. That's the definition, but you can't get to courage without that. And anytime anyone tries to challenge that, it's just a question of name one instance where you showed up courageously, or you saw someone do something courageous that didn't have uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. And it usually you get crickets. And this is in military in settings with soldiers and special forces and elite athletes. And then the third one is that courage is contagious. That the more it just takes 1, 2, and then a critical mass of courageous leadership starts to infuse a culture, and certainly in classrooms and in education and administration. So the heart of daring leadership has those 3 components that would form, that's how I would say is kind of those are the foundational plates of Dare to Lead.
That's perfect. And Fred, I was just thinking, we haven't had a chance to talk, so we'll talk after this at some point, that it is really interesting to hear the conversations and some of the research she's done talking to people in the military. I think that you would find that fascinating. Yeah,
I was just, that's what's been rolling through my head, Ashley. So I'm a former Marine, I'm officer. And I was just thinking about how, a 12-year, 15-year, 25-year military leader, enlisted or officer, developed over that time with a certain leadership philosophy package, if you want to call it that, coming in conflict with another leadership philosophy package. And that's what it feels like. I was just looking at some stuff today, even in preparing for tonight, where I was looking at some of the military aspects of it. So there's, not to belabor this. So the Marine Corps does the 14 leadership traits and principles. We get into all that. JJ did tie buckle, the acronym that goes along with justice, judgment, dependability, bearing, unselfishness, all that stuff. So we get all that, right? So that comes in. And when you said the notion of being, oh geez, I just wrote it down. You're being aware of oneself. That's at least, and during my time, that had not ever been a part of it. It's not. And so like all of a sudden now you're saying it's a major component. And I do see that as needed now in leadership. And I could see where there could be a real hard adjustment for people to make if they left the military and they're in corporate now and they're struggling with leadership and you're trying to get them to become aware of this one component of being aware of themselves or sensitive to those things. That's a tough shift. So I can imagine there's some banging of philosophies there, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I'll tell you anecdotally from my perspective, a lot of my colleagues are former military in the corporate world. And one colleague in particular I'm thinking of, who's a West Point graduate, we were having a really interesting conversation about how his perspective was that it was easier for military because the situations that he found himself in, that he had a pretty tough combat history, but each time the situations that what was called forth for him, was like that saturated with vulnerability. Almost every decision I made every day, 24/7, was, even the most like small seeming decisions had some element of courage and trade-offs, and the courage to decide and discern those trade-offs and not knowing the impact. And so for him, it was actually easier. So we had a really interesting conversation about that, because I had that idea that there's this rigor of structure, of organizational hierarchy, of role definition, that's very circumscribed, and that going into a corporate setting would be challenging. But my direct experience is that it's actually quite the opposite for military. I'm curious to check that out with you. How does that land?
Yeah, no, I agree. So there's that stereotypical view of anybody in the military, right? Because we all have the same haircut, we all dress the same, we all kind of carry ourselves the same way. but there is the good leaders that I've been fortunate to be around and to serve under and to learn from and then ultimately lead. They are the ones that understood what it meant when you put others first and you take the back seat to a lot of these things. But there are the other folks, there are those people that exist that go in, as I call them, guns a-blazing. And they are the ones that often give us the bad reputation of what a good leader is. And subtly you have to bring them along and all. But you're right. I think that is true more so than not. And I only raise that up as the conflict between those two leadership packs or tracks, because I could also see there's an easier path with that too, right? Because if you don't, become self-aware, you could just go in and stumble through things and you don't feel anything really. And then it appears to be easier. It's when you do care for people. It's when you do put yourself at the back of the line for everybody else. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do for most people.
I was going to say, I think that's very similar in education as well, the way things are organized, right? Or teachers, Letitia's talked a lot about, when you can close the door and just be you with your students in the room, there's a difference between that versus the leader, telling you what to do, constantly coming in and observing you and you feeling like what you're trying to do with your students maybe doesn't match with that. So this kind of pairs nicely with something that I wanted to ask Ashley to do for us. And if you guys are willing to participate, it won't take long. But Ashley, when I was going through the program with her, she did this activity with us every time. And it was so amazing. And I think it's something that teachers could do with their peers and with their students. And that's writing a permission slip for yourself, whether it's for the day or for like us right now in this conversation. And I'm happy to give an example and hopefully Ashley will too. But if we all want to write, a permission slip for each other, you could do it on a Post-it note or just, write it down somewhere. But we can kind of model what that sounds like. And then Pete, friend Letitia, are you game to do that for this conversation today?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Ashley.
This is a great, should I just tee it up of kind of what we're doing from a skill? So there's a quote from Joseph Campbell, who's a philosopher, and he worked with George Lucas to do that epic scene where Luke, faces his shadow side and goes in the cave and fights Darth Vader. I may be getting too geeky here. I don't know.
No, you're perfect. Stay on it.
Look behind Fred. There's R2D2.
I'm like, you're good.
I love this conversation. It's so interesting. She talks about it in the book as well in Dare to Lead. But Joseph Campbell, that whole scene where Luke goes in the cave comes from this quote of "the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." So where we most kind of quake in our shoes is usually like the thing that we most long for. And so what permission slip, that's kind of a more profound kind of undercurrent setting, but our permission slip is a way just to shine a light on a behavior that might get in the way of how you want to show up, or a behavior that you want to make sure you do that will help you show up. And so usually when we're getting ready to do something that's courageous, that can be when the worst critic comes into play. Like, you sure you want to do that? And the self-doubt. So this is really handy to keep in the foreground. It's like a message from our higher future self talking back to us. So writing on a piece of paper, and I use Post-it notes, of keeping it in front of you just keeps that intention in the foreground. So it could be things like, I want to stay open-minded. I want to stay curious and be a learner, not a knower. I want to give myself permission to ask for what I need. And that is one that I know in education settings is a big one. And I hope we talk about boundaries at some point throughout this. But asking for what I need is a radical act of self-awareness and self-love. I have to know what I need and then ask for it. So it's writing down a permission that helps you show up how you want to show up most courageously and for yourself. And as you all write, what I often invite groups to do, to the level of their comfort, is to share one or two. There's no limit, by the way. I sometimes have 15, depending on the day or the situation. But I'll ask groups to share one or two permissions. And what happens is really interesting. It's very trust building because it's kind of vulnerable, because it shows I'm saying out loud, hey, this is important to me. if I'm someone who always answers first in class or in a meeting, maybe I give myself permission to stay quiet and listen, or vice versa. If I'm quiet and I give myself permission to lean in. So sharing our permission slip is an act of vulnerability that creates trust and connective tissue within groups and teams and classrooms. The other thing is it cross-pollinates, because very often, in fact, Erin, I think you had one in our workshop. Someone will say something and it's like, oh, that's good. Yeah, me too. And we'll write it down. So the cross-pollination and the trust is a really beautiful outcome of the permission slip. That's something that we do for ourselves. And so, yeah, right now, the question that I would ask in teams or classroom is, what do you need to give yourself permission to do, or to feel, or to not do? Sometimes that's a powerful one, to show up courageously or with self-kindness. So I will share one of mine, which is permission to have fun. As I was saying earlier, Letitia, I think before you came, that being with the educators, you can throw me in front of, power elite at corporation, this, whatever. But educators is where I feel so, it feels so important. And I can get tight because I want to make sure I say everything there ever was that could ever be known about Dare to Lead, or to be of most service. And so just permission to have fun and light and feel like it's enough. And if it isn't, that there's space after this for people to resource each other, to reach out to me. So permission to have fun is mine for tonight.
That's a good one.
I like it.
Mine's kind of interesting one. So one of mine is I give myself permission to let my mind wander sometimes during the conversation. And I think it's that because I want to try to be such a good host and facilitate, make sure everyone gets to say what they want to say, I sometimes don't let myself kind of wander off and thinking about what's being said. So I'm going to give myself a little more room for that, for this conversation, I think.
You should be in my head someday. No, you said no.
She'd need an air mattress. She'd need an air mattress to rest after all of that.
Brad, is your mind off leash all the time?
Yes, I think it is. I think it is.
I love
Sorry
it.
sorry for the barking in the background. I think the bear is nearby again.
Oh, the bear's back. It's fall.
Bears.
I am definitely going back and listening to every podcast.
We have bears, we have dogs, we have cats.
Oh.
Well, no pressure, but does anyone else want to share a permission? There really is no pressure if you want to keep it to yourself.
I think I'm going to share mine. There's some psychological safety here, so we're gonna go right on in. I give myself permission to remain grounded in humility while not shrinking who I am.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's really good, Letitia.
You just
I had to unpack that one for a second, but yeah, I love that.
Woo, that actually brought tears to my eyes. I love it. It was beautiful. So beautiful, my friend.
Don't make me cry. Don't make me cry.
I'm so emotional anymore on these conversations. You guys see that? What is going on? Woo.
I know.
You guys know I'm open about therapy, and that is many hours of work. That it's okay to be humble, right? Humility is important, but we live in a society that doesn't encourage humility, right? It's competition. Who can be first? Who has the title? Who has this, right?
Yeah.
But humility brings power, and so that's my permission to be humble and me at the same time.
Your
jump in here?
Therapy work is a gift here.
Yes.
Yeah, Pete, if you feel comfortable, go ahead.
Yeah.
So I've been on a long journey to make my theater company become a nonprofit, and I have a to-do list every night. And I always have the homework I need to do to make this to progress further into this process. It's always on the bottom of the to-do list, and I keep putting it off because I don't have all the answers, because I'm scared, because of what's going to happen. And so I'm saying I'm giving myself permission to take that next big step, move those to-dos up a few notches, make it more a priority, and being okay with not know what's going to happen or not knowing all the answers right now. I've been really dragging my feet on it. And so this is very helpful. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you for sharing. That was awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know your journey on that, Pete, and I know you could do it. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Get it off the bottom of the list.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We're ready to throw a party.
Yeah.
Please.
So is this me now?
Yeah, if you'd like to, sure.
I want to talk about pizza a little bit more. Why do you keep putting it at the bottom of the list again?
Huh?
Why do you
What?
keep putting it at the bottom of the list?
I thought you said I want to talk about pizza a little bit more. All right.
Yeah, let's talk.
Anchovies.
Right. I'll do a supreme. I
There's
mean,
no good pizza where we live.
You know what I had? I had a Hawaiian pizza
Here
last
we
week,
go.
and it was like it was fantastic.
was
No, it's
it?
not. That's against the universe.
Right. Pineapple. I don't know.
It
I've
was
never
it was
understood it.
it was excellent. But I'll tell you what, for a breakfast, it was awesome too. It was good. It was good at the dinner. It was good cold.
There we
So,
go.
sorry, I'm throwing
He's trying to take a slice out of the conversation.
to.
Doesn't have to go.
Fred,
I
to
love
answer your
it.
question, it's because I put everything else is more important to me. Family, work, I associate that with me. I
Mm.
put it at the end. So when I get to it, and I need to step up and push it up and get going. You know
That's-
me. You know me.
Yeah, and that is the reason why I asked that is because mine is almost it's driven by the same thing you just said.
Mhm.
So mine is to get back out there,
Mm.
and that getting back out there. So I need to get back out there because I need to have the big shoulders to carry my friends and others when they're not able to carry themselves.
Mm.
And what that means is like I think for the past 2 years, COVID has disbanded. It feels like it's disbanded my closest group of knit friends, and from that close group of knit friends, that's where my energy always came from to do everything else that I do. Exploring gadgetry, teaching in the classroom. That energy always came from them. So I think I've always found myself as being the thread that runs through a lot of my friends, because I get that comment a lot. Some share that with me, but recently it just feels like we've all pulled back, and for whatever reason, we're finding it hard to get back into the saddle again. So I think I want to give myself permission. And I say permission, I mean, COVID was real for my family and in my household. Most people know that story. But the thing is, I think that's a factor. It's real. It's done some stuff to us. We can't ignore it. But the thing is, getting back in that saddle, I think, is going to be really incredibly important for me going forward. And I need to give myself permission to do that. I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet, though. I think I've started to touch the edges of that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not quite sure what it ultimately means. It doesn't mean just, doing maybe all the same old stuff, but it does mean getting together, in that physical sense, so that's the permission to do that. And so Pete, that's why I thought ours are kind of similar. We want to be there for our family and our friends, and it kind of stops us from doing it. So I'm trying to get back to my family and friends so I could kind of move forward. So there, let it be written, let it be done. So
Ooh, those are goosebump, tear-worthy permission slips. I'm glad crying has been mentioned. I should have displayed in the beginning that my water table runs pretty high. But thank you all. Those are really, the self-awareness in all of that is clearly so present, and the courage. So just, some things that struck me, the courage to, when I think about a checklist, it's easy, like things to grab first of like, great, I can do that. I'll check that off. I know how to do that. Yep. Whew. And then like the big ones looming at the bottom, sometimes they are the least urgent, but the most important, and the least clear how to the uncertainty in them is so, and so it's easy, like day after day, how those get, and for both, and for it to be so meaningful, just really struck by the depth of self-awareness in all of these permissions and the courage to lean into them.
So
Thank
part
you.
of the workshop with Dare to Lead is thinking about those courage building skills. Will you share with us a little bit about that? What does that mean? What do those look like?
Yeah, definitely. And I love the word skills because these are learned and taught. They're observable and measurable. So these are not things people just have, or they don't, or, belongs to some genetic elite. We all at some point have learned these somewhere or another. And so from the research, there are 4 skill sets, and you can go on the Dare to Lead Hub. There's a daring leadership assessment, and you can see in this point in time, because it changes and evolves, where you are with these 4 skill sets. But really at a high level, rumbling with vulnerability. There are 4 skill sets, but rumbling with vulnerability is like, I think 2/3 of the book. So know that going into that was one to lock horns with. And that's like, can you stay in tough things when they get uncomfortable and awkward, or do you tap out? And then living into your values is the second one. This is a hard one because some of us may or may not have a sense of what we think of as our values, but this takes it to the next step of operationalizing those values. Who am I really? Like, what are my behaviors when I am most aligned and living into my values? And what are the behaviors that tell me I have been capsized and I am not in my values? And getting really clear on that and sharing that with others is another foundational skill set in daring leadership. The third one is braving trust. And there are 7 elements to braving trust that are really helpful. I really encourage people to look into that. There are resources on the Dare to Lead Hub. You can reach out to me. It's amazing to build trust in classrooms with colleagues and to give language for how to do that. And that's basically, how do you build trust, and how are you being trustworthy, oneself being trustworthy? The fourth one is learning to rise. And this was interesting. This came out, a lot of this research came from the military and from elite, highly competitive sports teams, that the willingness to take risks and to do courageous things had a direct corollary to people who failed in the past and learned to rise from it. So basically, if I can take the risk that I might face plant in the arena, it's another Dare to Lead term, if I know that within I have the skills to rise and the resilience to rise from that, I'm a lot more likely to lean into that courage. So those are the 4 skill sets, and each one of those gets unpacked in the book. And there are really helpful tools on the Dare to Lead Hub to tuck into each one of those for more understanding. And then I'll say that in Dare to Lead, rumbling with vulnerability is the majority of the book. And learning to rise, rising strong, is its own entire book. So each of these has a lot of content, a lot of stories and richness to explore. The values one, this talks about it in an individual level, like who am I and my values. And there's also another version on the Dare to Lead Hub that's for teams, like who are we? What are our values? And Brené jokes about those awful eagle posters that are like integrity, when it's like the most ethically questionable workspace ever, and it's people just eat their lunch in the employee breakout room underneath it. So this is not that. This is, as a team, how honest can we get with that? So wonderful resources. So those are the 4 skill sets behind that. So easy to describe them, and not for the faint of heart.
Yes.
Can I ask a question while it's still burning in my head? You said about tapping out. This is a weird question. How do you know when you've tapped out?
Oh my God, I love this question. Okay. Well, what is your answer to that? Do you have a sense of that?
My initial thought is somebody that just kind of going back to what I was just talking about, like is a disconnect. It's like a disconnect, but that may not be a tapping out, right? That could be like, that's just disengaging, but tapping out, I wonder if it could be, there could be people that are thinking that they're engaged, but they've tapped out. I'm not sure if you were to share it with our listeners, maybe they've tapped out and they don't even know it. And that's important to be aware of that, right? Because that now you've become a weak link in the team, or maybe that's a poor way to put it, but maybe you're an element of the team now that can't contribute. So, we all like to think we're doing the right thing or we're doing the good work, but then all of a sudden, maybe we're really not doing certain things at the level. And what does that really look like, do you think?
Yeah, I love it. And Ashley, before you jump in, Fred, I love that you asked that question, because as you were asking it, I was like, that is silent quitting. Tapping out is silent quitting.
Yeah.
Right? To me anyway, right? Like where you're just doing
exactly
the minimum.
Yep.
Or what's required, but you're not going above and beyond.
And you're not telling you're telling yourself too, in a weird way, that I'm still doing the good job, or I'm still doing the job.
I love it. Yeah, yeah. Ashley, I'm sorry. I jumped in.
No apology. I hope this is an apology liberation zone. No apology. And silent quitting is, oh my gosh, like that has like a physical body to it. I can feel that.
Yeah.
What I would say in my experience is it doesn't look like what you think it does. Because a lot of times when that term tapping out, it can sound aggressive, like I'm out, like a mic drop and set the place on fire on my way out. But I actually see it most often in nice cultures. And so I actually see it a lot in education. And so there are a lot of catalysts that could lead to that. The biggest is rewinding to the Dare to Lead, how the research kind of kickstarted was no one could define courage, but they could say pretty quickly what it wasn't. And the main number one by far, the second wasn't even a close second. The number one behavior that showed people were not leaning into courage and not being daring in their leadership was not showing up for tough conversations. So what it looks like is staying comfortable, which is a definition of privilege. So around conversations of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, when you hear things like, it's a nice culture, like, I don't want to confront that person or circle back there because I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. That's the definition of privilege. The other people are already uncomfortable, whatever the situation is. So that tapping out to not cause waves or discomfort is a way that shows up a lot. And no one is doing that actually, I won't make a broad stroke around that, but another way that shows up is in feedback. So no feedback cultures is a big one where we aren't giving really tough feedback from an honest place, from a courageous and a connecting place, but feedback that's really helpful. It's the only way to mastery. And the flip side of that is receiving feedback, doing that in a way where I stay present, I'm engaged, I'm not defensive. But that tapping out is often sidestepping and bypassing real feedback, whether it's formal or informal, keeping cultures, conversations polite. Another behavior that can look like is gatekeeping, where if things start to get really honest and there starts to feel some friction, a lot of groups have norms, these unspoken, sometimes spoken norms about how to deflect. It could be the person who holds the most power shuts it down. It could be humor, like someone makes a joke, everybody laughs and you move on. It could be, I don't know if there's an actual verb, like administrativizing it, like, yes, we should look into that. Can someone go study everything that there ever was to know about that and then come back next month? And by the time anyone circles back, it's kind of lost its the presence to it. So those are just some ways. So let me stop there. That's a lot. Does that?
Well, that's great. Yeah, no, it really does. Thank you very much. No, I think it does, because I would like our listeners to be kind of pondering that and kind of playing around that head, because I think we're all in those spaces. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about it initially from the professional standpoint, the teacher standpoint. But then I started to put myself in the role of the student. And what does a student tap out look like? Especially when they get to the upper divisions, high school even, and upper divisions, the education system starts to become something they may not be buying into. And when you said about the feedback, that's what really triggered it. Was we get feedback from students, but it's not a very good approach the way we handle it, I don't think. But it's interesting
parents.
That it's interesting. Yeah, it is very interesting. It's in terms of if the students are tapping out, which they do, but they're still engaged, and they don't get the outcome isn't what they expect, and then they kind of just go the road with it. It's interesting.
And Fred, as you kind of were talking with Ashley, my wheels were turning, because I've seen this thread throughout educational system, from the classroom all the way up to someone being interviewed to be an assistant superintendent. So the kids get this very generic good and a star on their paper as feedback. Well, what does that mean, right? Then we were kind of taught that a best practice is to actually give feedback. Like, why is this good? Or, where do you have room to grow? So we had to write more commentary, right? But, Ashley, as you were describing the different ways that this shows up, I mean, I just remember literally being in interviews where people have studied, I guess, practiced. This is their career, and they're going up for a job as an assistant principal or a principal or even area superintendent. You know, these are interviews I've sat in on, and these people would not get feedback. You know, and it was amazing to me because you're in a room with, I guess, the C class of the educational system, right? These are the people leading the district.
Yeah.
And no one has a clue on how to give someone feedback on something as important as their career. Like, this person wants to be an assistant principal, a principal, maybe a superintendent one day. And it was just amazing to see how the inability to have that conversation really crippled the process, right? And then as a person that they would call, they would be, you know, the candidate would be extremely frustrated.
Yeah.
Because no one is telling them, okay, you know, if you worked on this or this went really well, this, you know, it's an area of growth. You know, these things were just not happening consistently. It was kind of like a hit and a miss, which is why I just want to reiterate how important this work is in the school system. You know, this really, I feel like this is the course they need to take to get their credentialing, really. Because all the other stuff at the end of the day, although important, this is really where it's at. This is the heart.
Yeah, because Letitia, I really like what you said. I don't mean to jump in back in here, but I really like what you said there, because as you're saying that, I was thinking about, like, when did teachers fall under this impression that they weren't leaders? Because that's what it feels like. It's like, so what we're talking about is the concept of dare to lead, and you're talking about leadership, the ability to get skilled up, I guess. And it almost seems like, well, no, leaders are really only in the business world, okay, or they're only in the military, and teachers. So then when you talk about feedback, you know, as being a part of an important element in leadership, some teachers may look at that and say, well, feedback really isn't that important to us right now. It's because we're, you know, it's not part of our not part of our ecosystem or our ethos or whatever. And I kind of think I do believe that there are teachers that don't think of themselves as leaders. I think they just look at themselves as teachers, and they're people in the classroom with little people or big people. And I think that's a shift that has to change. That's why I think your work is important, Ashley, as you get in front of more teachers, is to get them to realize their leadership role is paramount. Just because, you know, you see a class come and go over time doesn't mean that you're still not in the leadership role. It's like, I think there's this other, you know, perception that leadership is a manager, a CEO, a director, a principal. You know, leaders are good followers, right? And also, good leaders are good followers. And I think that's where we have to help, you know, bring that about. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, and it's just been my observation that, unfortunately, not just in education, but in organizations, I think across the board, that it's this idea of power over instead of power with. Right. So if you feel that someone is over you, then I'm not a leader, right? I'm being led. Right. And so, I mean, and then here in our state, which is sad, but I mean, we don't even have a voice to champion how much we make. You know, we don't even have a union, a teachers union, right? So we don't even have a voice at the table to really speak for us, even in our salary, our benefits. And it's because there's this power over and not power with mentality. And I think that that's the paradigm that needs to take place.
Yeah. And Letitia, as you're talking, you know, when people watch the YouTube video, they'll see you're kind of putting your hands over, and it almost looks like a shield. So it's making me think of, Ashley, of armoring up, right? That teachers especially are armoring up because they feel like they can't cope. They don't know how to deal with it. So can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like, how we can maybe recognize when we are putting our armor on? Because my assumption is it's okay. Sometimes you need to do that to protect yourself, but to really make any positive movements, you've got to kind of be able to be aware when your armor's up and do something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to normalize that too, because even this incapacity or this absence or void sometimes of being able to give and receive feedback, a lot of people, well, I'll ask y'all here, did any of you grow up in a household that was super emotionally intelligent and fluent and skillful in showing up to hard conversations? And that mantra that I love, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Was that present in anyone's household growing up? I occasionally have someone, I think maybe there have been 2 people in my career.
I think we're all giving looks like no.
Yeah.
No.
For the listeners, that's, you are hearing crickets. Yeah. So it makes sense that as adults, we're in the same, we didn't learn these skills. And so these words that are being used like paramount and imperative, and it's the teachers, I have to say, really, it's I don't know, a shock to me to hear the thought that teachers wouldn't see themselves as leaders. Because I think, like, who else, like who better, but, and also who else, like the impact and the radiating impact that teachers have is just so powerfully known, and even beyond what an educator could ever know. So if that isn't a thing, my first thought is we got to change that. We can't have that. But the armor, Aaron, to your question, the armor kind of like some of these things we come by honestly. So when we talk about armor, there are these behaviors that we have when we shift into self-protection. And it's such a natural response. So sometimes people, when they start to become aware of their armoring patterns, they feel shame and self-judgment. So I want to normalize, we all have armor. And sometimes maybe that's the discerning thing to do, is to do that. And but what's different, the shift here is the awareness piece. How aware can I be of the armoring patterns I have? And so that can be, there's also on the Dare to Lead Hub, an armoring to daring leadership tool where you can self-assess. It has the 4 skill sets, and then it has the different categories and behaviors beneath it, where you can take a look, like, where am I on this spectrum? And in, Aaron, you have this in the workbook that has, it's very detailed. It can be overwhelming. Aaron and I are proudly, geekily holding up our workbooks. I love it. But there are things like going from leading reactively to leading proactively and strategically. So that action bias, like there's a problem, oh, let's fix it, instead of let's learn, like what's really at play here. That being a knower and being right, that can be such a power over dynamic. I'm going to shut this down because I'm going to be right. And I claim this one. This is an armoring one for me. So if you hear harshness, my family calls it when I lawyer up. And I want to say that when we look at the armoring behaviors and the daring leadership behaviors, depending on the day or what triggers us, we can be both on all sides. So the real shift is just how much awareness can we have so that we can then be at choice and decide, like, whew, I think I'm lawyering up. That's not really helpful for my family or connecting. Let me choose something different, or go calm down. There's another one I wanted to bring in. Oh, there's so many. The shame and blame culture, I think, is a big one, because the shift there is going from a shame and blame finger pointing culture. If there's a problem, it's like, whose fault is it? Where's some heads are going to roll. And everybody's like, keeps their head down, hoping, and they're kind of relieved when someone else gets, the blame. But the shift from that is going to empathy and accountability and a learning culture. Like, okay, this just happened, so pin drop here and look forward. What do we learn from this together? What do we, like, where were the signs? How could we support each other and not doing that again? So the armoring strategies and that power over, that can be control. Like, a lot of that is from the self-protection that it's not safe for me if I'm not in control. So I'm going to dominate with the power that I hold. And that can get scary, the more positional power someone holds in an organization. There's so many good ones. Let me stop there. But there's a lot to learn about how we armor up. And there's a lot of detail in Dare to Lead and on the Hub. And there's a lot beyond that. What I'll say also, and we talk about this a little bit in the workshop, and I'd like to bring it in even more because it's so powerful, is our armor usually has a physiology that starts to kick in as early as 30 minutes or even hours before we're consciously aware that we're armored up. So by the time we're doing some of these behaviors, they usually have some preceding physiology. So I'll ask y'all, I'm curious, like if you know you have a really tough conversation with a parent, and this parent is gonna come in guns blazing, and they just, I don't know, I'm gonna generalize. They just want an A for their kid at any cost. They don't care what, or, whatever feels really hostile and threatening, or it's just gonna be hard conversation. Physically, what comes up for you when you think about anticipating that conversation?
I'm thinking of you, Pete. Pete, what happens to you?
Tension. My neck goes and I get the headache. Oh, the neck. Yeah, Fred. I get the mood neck. Yeah.
It gets red in the neck.
Right. Yeah. So the blood goes up
Yeah.
and tension that creates a headache.
Yeah. Yeah.
Butterflies. I think butterflies are part of it.
Yeah. Your butterflies. Yeah.
Yeah, my stomach definitely starts to hurt. That's usually the big sign, is the stomach. Sometimes a headache. I think just that tension of just worry. So my head starts to hurt.
I got some belly, some neck, head, butterflies. Letitia.
I'm a belly
vibration.
person.
Feels like you're vibrating. It's like,
Yeah.
I have a new one now, Ashley, actually in my mouth. My jaw. I'm
Your
starting to
jaw.
have issues. I think I clench now.
Yeah.
That's a new thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a big one. The jaw. So in the workshop that Aaron, I don't know if you remember, our really sad blob person, we draw a outline of a person on the board, and then everyone says what their different early warning signs are, and we draw it on this person, and by the end that he, she, they looks decimated,
Like should be in the hospital.
Definitely in critical care somewhere under 24/7 watch.
that's how you do feel, though.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. But what's so powerful to know about that is the more awareness we can build around that physiology, because that usually starts to happen and trickle in before we enact it in behavior. So the more aware we can become of our physiology, for me, I hold my breath. So when I think like, I have not taken a full breath in a few minutes, something's at play here? Like, oh, I'm worried. I start to sense some tension there, those people, and I'm worried about this. And I sometimes draw, this is where my educator, I'm going to lean into my
Lean in.
Okay.
Ashley.
I know this is, some people will hear this, right, and not see the visuals.
Right. But that's
Right.
okay. We'll
All
tell
right, so
them.
I'll just
There is a
describe.
video. Check us out on YouTube.
Yes.
This is an inelegant illustration, so I'll describe it, but it's just basically a circle with a line of awareness through it. And the more we can pull things above that line, the more choice we have. And then I'll bring my next drawing, which is, if you're listening, it's kind of like two parentheses. And the space going into the parentheses is the stimulus. And this is a quote that's sometimes attributed to Viktor Frankl, but it's actually not known what the source is. So this is there's a stimulus coming in, and then there's a space in between. And then on the other side, spitting out is our reaction.
Mhm.
I'll note again, a lot of courage to do this in front of educators. But what this speaks to is that when we are on autopilot and we're not aware, the stimulus comes in and we shoot out a response. And it's very likely to be an armored up response. When we become more aware that we've been triggered either by our physiology, or we start to notice our behaviors, or we just recognize the profile of something that's going to trigger us, then we can bring in some things that can help us pause and make that space
Right.
before we react even bigger. So that can be breathing deeply. I really love doing a 5-count inhale and then a 7-count exhale. So just a half beat longer on the exhale. Doing that for as little as 30 seconds down regulates the stress response. So we can bring in some skillful means to make that space wider, where we self-care, and what comes out the other side is likelier to bring us the things that we really want, like real connection, real belonging, being fully seen for who we are. So I'll pause there. That's me saying a lot of stuff. I'm curious how that lands, what comes up for you all.
and Ashley, as a therapist, it takes sometimes a year with clients to help them to really notice how depression starts to show up or anxiety starts to show up, because there's such a disconnect between that trigger, the body, and then the response. And I think even bringing this again to classrooms and even for teachers, right? That 5-7 breathing technique. I mean, it is a game changer. The 5-7 or any other 5-minute meditation, or these things actually do work, and we want choice. That's the key there. That pause actually makes space for choice.
The box breathing. I'm thinking box breathing. Yeah.
Box breathing.
Do you know that from the military?
Yeah.
Yep.
It puts power back into ourselves, right? Of being able to stop, do a little check. We do that with our devices. We do that with our cars. So why not do that with ourselves, right? If something doesn't seem to be right, take a moment and try to figure out what that is. It's funny, I've become more aware of that, even more so since taking the Dare to Lead workshop, Ashley, with you. But I still find myself every now and again not recognizing it. And then all of a sudden I'll pause and be like, wait a minute, why is my stomach hurting? Something must have stressed me out. And then I start going through it. So, better late than never, but it does gives a sense of power back to myself, because a lot of times once I figure out that I'm having a physical reaction that's an emotional or some kind of trigger response to something going on around me.
Right.
It's just amazing how much better it gets just from me identifying that it's there, and that this is probably what triggered it.
Yeah. Thank you, Erin, for saying that, because that is so profound, that even it's never too late to notice it. So we always can learn about ourselves. So going backwards, like, wait, what are the breadcrumbs that led to that? And the other piece is, if we just go, we just ride the bull the whole way, and we don't catch it until much later. And we have that recognition of, oh my gosh, like I didn't pause. That is a place for self-compassion, the courage to find self-kindness, grace, and self-forgiveness. And so that pause retroactively comes in that way as well. It's not another opportunity for beating oneself up or finding fault. That's another opportunity to go back and self-awareness build, self-love, self-nourish, and self-resource. So the pause is powerful.
Yeah, I think if any one of you in this room, or if myself was beating myself up about something, you all would give me such grace. So why wouldn't I give that to myself as well? Because I would do it for you too, right? Yeah. So a lot of times I think of that. Ashley, I could keep talking to you, I mean, forever. The things that you have talked about, I think, is so helpful, whether you're in education or not. We have a lot of parents that listen and students as well. It's just amazing. I'm curious about your story of an educator or a coach or mentor, or someone growing up that inspired you, or that's always just kind of stayed in your mind, that if you wouldn't mind sharing.
I would love to share that. And I have to say a thing that feels so important. Can I shoehorn it in?
Please.
Sure.
Oh, yay. Okay. This came out of the research that blew my mind. And Erin, we talked about this in the workshop, but that in the research, they were trying to figure out the leaders who had the greatest capacity for compassion for others and for themselves, like true compassion, not nice, polite, but real compassion. What did those leaders have in common? And I'm curious, do you have any guesses of what that might have been? Erin, do you remember from our workshop?
A little bit. So I'm gonna stay quiet.
Okay.
They all had in common.
Compassion.
Oh. Is it compassion?
Oh, wait, I thought you said what?
The leaders with the greatest capacity for compassion for others and for themselves. And the research looked at, was it socioeconomic degrees, educational level? They came from functional or dysfunctional families. They have a faith-based practice, all kinds of slicing and dicing, age. And it was none of those. The one thing they all had in common was a practice of drawing clear and kind boundaries. That clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so I want to bring that in because I know this came up in our workshop, Erin. It comes up a lot when I'm with educators, and I see it in my own lived experience as a parent and volunteering in schools. It is really a radical act of courage and sometimes seems impossible, I think, for educators to draw boundaries that are self-resourcing and self-sustaining. So I want to bring that in because there can be a mythology that drawing a boundary or saying no is selfish, or it's not
rude.
It's rude. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is based on now 20 years of research. I think it's up to like 750,000 pieces of data that this is consistent across every leader in the study, that was the one thing they had in common. Leaders with compassion were the ones who had a practice of drawing and maintaining clear boundaries. So relinking that drawing boundaries is compassion is very empowering, because otherwise, if we don't have boundaries, we're actually not giving from compassion. We're giving from resentment or burnout or depletion, and that isn't kind to our own self or really truly compassionate. It brings up a lot of other stuff. So I find that so much in education. I just wanted to make sure that gets said and spoken, and hopefully plants and waters some seeds of what that might look like to draw just this week, draw one boundary. And it can be so small you can step over it, or it could be tectonic plate shifting. But one thing meaningful for you is a radical practice to bring in courageous leadership.
The first thing that came to mind while you were saying that was caregivers. Caregivers, a son or a daughter taking care of a parent, especially, running themselves ragged but there are some boundaries you got to set yourself. And Letitia and I think we talked about that many episodes ago, and how you have to take care. You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And that's what those boundaries do in a way. It kind of keeps from, like you said, wearing yourself out.
It's like being a blood donor. I think of that as teachers sometimes, like a blood donor and your tap is just always open. It's like the courage to say like, not now, or no, or I need to rest.
I'm sorry. Not a part of a teacher's life.
I know.
Right.
And
that's the problem.
These are the leaders. Like there's no one in greater deservedness. People can be as deserving, but I'm just so, this gets into your question, Erin, of educators who've impacted me. I think that we can never fully know the impact that educators have on children who grow into adults who then have children and lead everything in this world. And so for me, you'd ask me that question in advance, and I thought so. I've been thinking about it now for weeks, and as I thought about it, this is where I'm at great risk of my water table rising. One of the reasons that educators and education is so important to me is I grew up in financial instability, lots of dysfunction, and school and the classroom saved me. The educators, that's who saved me. And I realized I kept trying to think of, your question was like, a name or a couple of teachers. And I have to say, it's actually the everydayness. There wasn't like a hero teacher, but I can think back on my childhood and how I must have looked and shown up in class, and clearly poor and not the well-dressed, well-resourced, had all my school supplies student, but the not that student. And looking back through adult eyes and seeing how those teachers welcomed and received me and took interest in me and loved my love of learning, and year after year after year, that I don't think I can ever give enough back. And so I would say all of them. So I thank all of them.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
There's
There's no rules to that. So that's lovely. That's lovely. And I could see Letitia is trying to,
not cry.
Yeah, not cry, not cry. Well, this is the part that we kind of all take a moment and just quickly share something that just came from this conversation, whether it was an idea, a thought, an inspiration. So if that's okay with you, we're gonna go through that, and then Ashley, you kind of get the last word if there's anything else that you'd like to say. I guess I'll start with Fred first.
Oh, I'm back to the top of the class this week. No, I've been in the back of the class. My last name begins with an
You're
A,
back
so
up
I'm
front,
so used
ably.
to sitting in the front. Yeah. So, all right. So there's two things. First of all, the Dare to Lead Hub, the call, you made several call outs to that. And while we were talking, I did take a quick peek at it. Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm going to make good use of this resource. I've teach a project management class this term, and we talk a lot about the soft skills, and there's a wealth of resources out here for my students. So thank you for that. But I love the phrase I might be paraphrasing part of it, but the face plan in the arena can give you the skills to rise. And I think, I don't know if you were pulling that from others, but be also part of yourself. But I love that notion of, failing or falling, and then ultimately, getting yourself up, brushing yourself back up, and then getting back into the game and learning from those mistakes. Because I think we all do that. We all experience that. But sometimes in the classroom space, we don't let that happen enough, and then give them good feedback, so that's the dusting off part, right? So they can get back into it. And I just like that reminder. And I hope all of our listeners and those that are out there that remind that we let our students fall, but help them get back up and get back in stronger.
That's great. Thanks, Fred. How about you, Pete?
So I started with, you can't get to courage without vulnerability. And the more I listened, and the more I listened, I said, I can't write all this down. And I just let it go. And I could listen to you talk forever. I think you're the longest guest we've ever had on. And it feels and this is
it's good.
Not bad. Good.
No, this is a wonderful thing, because every word you said, so full of insight, sensitivity, so thoughtful, so beneficial to everyone. So thank you so much for the gift tonight of just spending time with you and listening to your words. I don't have one takeaway. It's just the whole episode. So thank you so much.
Well said, Pete. Thanks. Letitia?
I love that. I love it. So like you, Pete, I was writing away and then kind of stopped, because I thought, I can go back and listen to her. Duh. But I love two things. One is that armoring up may be the discerning thing to do, right? Like, the more aware we become, sometimes it is necessary to do that for our own self-preservation. So I love that you kind of gave us permission to armor up. And then the other thing is that awareness, and this is paraphrasing, but awareness paves the way for choices. Self-awareness is a gift. I think it would relieve a lot of mental health and human suffering if we teach people how to become self-aware. So that was very encouraging, that awareness paves the way for choices. And when you have choice, you feel empowered. So thank you. Those were my two takeaways for tonight, or one of the two, or two of the two.
That's good. And mine, I feel like, could be on a t-shirt. It's a soundbite from Ashley. And you just said, teachers as leaders, who else? And I thought that is just such a perfect,
it's another hashtag
soundbite, right?
Yes.
Like, if we want to change the narrative, even for ourselves, like that should be out there. And I'm going to pair that with something that's in the Dare to Lead workbook I have, but I know that it is on the hub, Fred. And this is something I have on my desk, so I can look at it all the time. And it always makes me think of educators when I read it. It's Ashley, the Theodore Roosevelt quote that's in here.
Do you want to read it?
Do you mind?
Please. No, I was going to ask you if you would read it. Yeah.
Okay. So, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. I just love it. And I look at that a lot to just remind me of things very often when it seems like things are getting tough. So Ashley, I asked you to come do this very long time ago. So I'm so thankful for your valuable time and your patience and your thoughts. It's just been great. So if there's no pressure, any last thing you want to say or anything from the conversation tonight, this is it's all yours.
Thank you. My heart is so full, and it's such a gift to be with the four of you. And my first thought when you asked the question of checking out was my overriding feeling right now is a little bit of separation anxiety and jealousy that you get to spend time together all the time. Just what a rich space you have created.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Oh my gosh. And I just feel so grateful for the gift exchange. And I feel like the work you're doing is changing the narrative. And I don't think it could be known how far this ripples out of all of these conversations you're leading and inspiring others to do. And even with your permission slips, I'm so moved by that. I wrote all of them down. So just thank you. Deeply grateful. And if there's anything that I can do to be a resource in any way, please reach out. My heart is very in this to support educators. And yes, who else?
Who else,
better?
right?
When else?
That's a nice
Right,
little segue. If people would like to reach out, connect to you, or even maybe see if the Dare to Lead workshop is something they could do for their district, how can they find you?
Yeah, thank you. My website is midtownassociates.com. You can email me at ashley.gibbs@midtownassociates.com. And you call my number. Should I get my number? I'm always, I clearly love talking about this stuff.
No, they can reach out to you on the website. I think that's good. You might get inundated with a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
Trying to get to Fred or Letitia, our fans.
I'm already going to stalk her. So
I do want to say that just bring back in case this got lost, the Daring Classrooms Hub. So the Dare to Lead Hub is really rich, has a lot of stuff, and how it translates into Daring Classrooms. It just makes all that stuff already baked and translated into classroom settings to use with kids, to use with colleagues. So definitely take a look at that too.
Great reminder. Yeah. Thank you so much. And Pete, where can our crew find us?
Facebook group, Instagram, YouTube, our website, teacherpeprally.com. Give us a review. Keep the conversation going.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. We appreciate you. And hopefully tomorrow we'll write a new permission slip and keep that going.
I will keep that.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Good.
What a gift. Thank you all so much. What a treat.
Thank you.